Hey everybody. So I am had made a video in a while, but I was just doing a little reading out of this book called Encountering the New Testament, a historical and theological survey. Uh, I'm going to read a little small passage from there, but I also want to read a few verses out of Second Peter chapter 2. You know what? I'm going to read Second Peter first. It says, this is Second Peter chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, and I'm reading out of the New Living Translation. It says, but there were also false prophets in Israel, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will clearly teach destructive heresies and even deny the master who bought them. In this way, they will bring sudden destruction on themselves. Many will follow their evil teaching and shameful immorality. And because of these false teachers, the way of truth will be slandered. In their greed, they will make up clever lies to get hold of your money, but God condemned them long ago, and their destruction will not be delayed. As you read through the scriptures, and it's in the Old Testament as well, but just particularly want to highlight some of the things like from hearing Peter, but then you also get Paul talking about false teachers, false prophets in the Gospels as well. Jesus warns about those things. False messiahs coming on the scenes, right? Those chosen ones being used by God. But it's something that we tend to ignore, right? It's something that we seem to think, oh, this was something that happened during biblical times, but we can't have false teachers and false prophets and false all of these other things today and during our time. And I want you to think about something, because here the authors of this book, they say some very important things. So speaking about the time in Jesus's day and the different Jewish groups that existed during that time, and there was certain things they agreed upon and certain things they didn't agree upon. But one thing they agreed upon is that that God was going to send this chosen one, but how God was going to send that chosen one and what he was going to do when he came, they differed on. So it says there was widespread belief that God would send a chosen one, a Messiah who would defeat the Romans and usher in a time of universal peace with the center of the world in Jerusalem. Opinions varied about who the Messiah would be and precisely how he would accomplish the overthrow of the Romans. Some thought it would involve violence. Others thought it would come in a more spiritual way. But I want you to really listen to this last part. He says, false leaders appeared in the midst of this confusion. And then it goes on to talk about some were led out in the wilderness by one particular leader, and and was convinced them that God was going to show up and all that, and then they eventually got slaughtered by the Romans. But I want you to think about that one particular sentence, that phrase there. It says that false leaders appeared in the midst of the confusion, right? The midst of the confusion on how God was going to show up on their behalf, how he was going to come, and in a sense we can say come and take care of business. Abdul Murray wrote a book called Saving Truth. And I think it's something like, matter of fact, I have it around here, Finding Meaning Finding meaning and clarity in a post-truth world, right? So saving truth, finding meaning and clarity in a post-truth world. And all throughout that book, he highlights that theme of the confusion, right? We're in a culture of confusion that we're living in right now, and I totally agree with that. If one thing is elevated right now, if one thing stands out more than anything else, is probably the concept of confusion. Dallas Willard, in one of his books, he uses the language of flying upside down, not knowing which way is up, right? We find ourselves in difficult circumstances and situations when we allow ourselves and our societies and cultures to be wrapped up in a state of confusion. And it's important that we don't get there, but the problem is that we've already gotten there, right? But when he says that false teachers rose up during this climate of confusion, right? It's important, I think, and really that's the reason why I'm making this video, is that we are vigilant, that we are watchful, right? Because in the midst of confusion, people do all kinds of desperate things. Their desperate acts come from a heart that's saturated in confusion. And if we're not careful, as Peter points out, and as Paul points out, and even as Jesus points out in, I believe, in Matthew 24, is that even the elect, even God's chosen ones, could be led astray and led off by these false teachers and their false doctrines and their false understandings of how the world is and how we are to live within that world. You see, that's one of the reasons why we follow the teachings of Christ, right? Let's spend a brief moment on that. We follow his teachings because we believe that he understands the created world that we live in, universe, this planet Earth we live on. He understands all of creation as a whole, the animal, plant life, and us as a higher form of human beings. He understands those things greater than anybody else, but he also understands the unseen realm, right? We call it the metaphysical world, right? The stuff that you can't see, the spiritual realm, right? And he understands that better than anybody else. So we follow him because we believe that he has all of the answers to life and wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. That's why we choose to tag along with him as he shows us around. But one of the problems is that when we allow confusion to be at the forefront of everything that's going on right now, we tend to fall off because we are listening to all of the wrong voices that are permeating the climate that we're living in. And if you're living in a climate of confusion, it's easy to be led astray. Let me just say it in that simple way. It's easy to be led astray in a climate of confusion because it's, as the book of Judges says that in that day, everybody did what was right in their own eyes because there was no king in the land. And there are other couple of places in the Old Testament that say the exact same thing about people were doing things in their own, whatever they thought was right. And that's exactly the type of world and society that we live in right now. It's a society of confusion because we actually believe that we can come up with what is right in our own eyes. And for some reason, we think that everybody can be right at the same time. You know, you have a right, and then I have a right, and then this person has a right. And what happens when a right bumps up against somebody else's right? Is there ever a wrong? But in a state of confusion that we live in, all things are encouraged. Everything is encouraged. And, you know, not much is considered to be wrong. And we have many false teachers and false leaders that are rising up, leading people astray. And they're really good at tapping into certain things. They're really good at tapping into what you've been through. They're really good at tapping into affirming your identity. They're really good at tapping into how you feel and some of the wants that you have in life. People will make some stuff sound good because it's exactly what you're looking for. And as Paul tells us, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but principalities and powers, right? And in the spiritual realm, these ideas and these concepts are not new. You know, we find different ways of constructing things with each generation, right? But these same principles that rebel against God have their origin in the enemies of God, those that have rebelled against him in the spiritual realm, and they're making sure that his creation is doing some of those same things. But I just really want to pause for a moment as I read that false leaders appeared in the midst of this confusion. We live in a society, and one of the things about the world we live in right now in the 21st century is that the confusion is widespread. It's worldwide. It's not just particular to the United States or Britain or Canada or, you know, wherever. It's widespread. We are all subjected to this climate of confusion. And if we're not careful, we'll be led in places that we didn't plan to go, and we'll suffer the consequences that we didn't intend to live out. Keep your eyes open. Only by knowing the truth can you distinguish. You can judge between that which is true and right, versus the counterfeits. And as always, I like to leave my blessing with you. Grace, mercy, and peace be with you.